The garage smelled like motor oil and broken promises. I wiped my hands on an old rag, staring at the transmission fluid leak under my Ford pickup. Midnight again, and Vivian still wasn't home from another one of her networking events. My name is Frederick Ashford, but everyone calls me Rick. I fix computers for small businesses around Boston's suburbs, the kind of blue-collar tech work that pays the bills but doesn't impress anyone at country club dinners. Not that I ever get invited to those anymore. The house felt hollow when I walked inside. Our 17-year-old daughter Emma was heading upstairs, her expression darker than usual. "Another late business meeting?" she asked, not bothering to hide the sarcasm. "Your mother is building her empire," I said, trying to keep my voice light. Emma stopped on the stairs and turned around. "Dad, you're so gullible sometimes. Just check her purse for once." The words hit me like a wrench to the gut, but I kept my expression neutral. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Forget I said anything." She disappeared upstairs, leaving me standing in our pristine living room with its white furniture and expensive art that Vivian insisted we needed to project success. I stood there for 10 minutes, listening to the grandfather clock tick. Emma's words echoed in my head. Check her purse. Vivian's designer handbag sat on the kitchen counter, black leather that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. I'd never gone through her things before. 15 years of marriage, and I'd always trusted her completely. My hands shook slightly as I opened the clasp. Wallet, keys, makeup, breath mints, normal stuff. Then my fingers found a folded receipt tucked behind her credit cards. The Fairmont Hotel. Room service for 2. Date: 3 nights ago, when she'd said she was at a late investor meeting downtown. I sat down hard on one of our kitchen stools, staring at the receipt. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe she'd entertained a client there. Maybe... I kept digging. Another receipt. Same hotel. Different date. Then another. 5 receipts total, all from the past month. All on nights when Vivian had claimed to be working late on her new business venture. The business. Her big startup idea that was going to transform our social standing and finally give us the lifestyle we deserve. She'd been working with an investor, some finance guy named Leonard Hale, who was supposedly helping her launch a consulting firm for small businesses. I'd met Leonard once, briefly, when he'd picked Vivian up for what she called a strategy session. Expensive suit, silver hair, the kind of confident smile that rich men wear like armor. He'd shaken my hand and called me sport in a tone that made me want to punch him. But I'd pushed down that instinct. Vivian was excited about the business, more animated than I'd seen her in years. If Leonard Hale could help her achieve her dreams, then I'd swallow my pride and be supportive. Now, sitting in my kitchen at midnight, those hotel receipts told a different story. My phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. "Meeting running late. Don't wait up. Love you." I stared at the message, then at the receipts spread across our granite countertop. The timestamps on the hotel bills showed room service ordered well past midnight on each date. What kind of business meeting required champagne and chocolate-covered strawberries at 1 in the morning? I walked back to the garage and sat in my truck, trying to process what I'd found. The leather seats creaked as I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. 15 years of marriage. A daughter who was about to start her senior year of high school. A mortgage, shared bank accounts. A life built together. And hotel receipts that suggested my wife was having an affair with her investor. The smart thing would be to confront her directly. Ask for an explanation. Give her a chance to clear this up. But something Emma had said stuck with me. "You're so gullible, Dad." Maybe I had been gullible. Maybe I'd been so focused on keeping the peace, on being the supportive husband, that I'd missed obvious signs. The late nights had been going on for months, the secretive phone calls, the way Vivian had started dressing differently, buying expensive clothes she claimed were necessary for business meetings. I pulled out my phone and did something I'd never done before. I checked our phone records online. Vivian's number showed dozens of calls to the same contact over the past 3 months. The calls lasted anywhere from 20 minutes to over an hour, often late at night. I cross-referenced the number with a reverse lookup service. Leonard Hale's personal cell phone. My hands were steady now, my mind clear. I wasn't going to be gullible anymore. I was going to find out exactly what kind of business my wife was conducting. The next morning, Vivian came down to breakfast looking perfectly put together, as always. Her blonde hair was styled in loose waves, her makeup flawless despite her supposedly late night. She kissed my cheek and poured herself coffee from our expensive espresso machine. "How was your meeting?" I asked, watching her face carefully. "Productive," she said without hesitation. "Leonard thinks we'll be ready to launch by the end of the month. The investor presentations are going really well." She was a good liar. If I hadn't seen those receipts, I would have believed every word. "That's great," I said. "Maybe I should meet with Leonard properly sometime. You know, husband to husband. Make sure he knows you have support at home." Vivian's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. "That's sweet, honey, but Leonard prefers to keep things professional. He's very focused on the business aspects." "Of course he is." Emma came downstairs wearing her school uniform, grabbing a piece of toast before heading out. She looked between Vivian and me, and I saw something like pity in her eyes when she looked at me. "Have a good day at school," Vivian called after her. "Sure, Mom. Have fun at your business meetings." The sarcasm in Emma's voice was unmistakable, but Vivian either didn't notice or chose to ignore it. After they both left, I sat alone in our kitchen, surrounded by the trappings of the successful suburban life Vivian had always wanted. The granite countertops, the stainless steel appliances, the fresh flowers she had delivered weekly. Everything perfect and cold. I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of going to my first client appointment, I drove to Charlie's boxing gym in the old part of town. Charlie Santoro had been my coach back in high school, and his gym was the one place where I could think clearly. The smell of sweat and leather, the rhythm of gloves hitting heavy bags, the honest simplicity of physical exertion. Charlie was in his 60s now, gray-haired and still built like a brick wall. He looked up from wrapping a young fighter's hands when I walked in. "Rick Ashford," he said with a grin. "What brings you to my establishment on a Tuesday morning? Shouldn't you be fixing someone's computer?" "I need to hit something," I said. Charlie's expression shifted. He'd known me for over 20 years, and he could read the tension in my shoulders. "Bad day already?" Getting worse by the minute, he handed me a pair of gloves and pointed toward the heavy bags. "Work it out, then talk." I spent 30 minutes pounding leather, letting the physical exertion clear my head. When I finally stopped, sweating and breathing hard, Charlie was waiting with a towel and a bottle of water. "So," he said, "what's eating you?" I told him everything. The receipts, the phone records, the lies. Charlie listened without interrupting, his weathered face growing more serious with each detail. "You sure about this?" he asked when I finished. "Because once you start down this road, there's no going back to pretending everything's fine." "I'm sure." "What do you want to do about it?" I'd been thinking about that question all morning. The old Rick would have confronted Vivian directly, probably ended up apologizing somehow for not trusting her. But the old Rick had been gullible. "I want proof," I said. "Real proof. And then I want to make sure they both pay for what they've done." Charlie nodded slowly. "Revenge is a dish best served cold, my friend. But it's also a dish that can poison the cook if you're not careful." "I'll be careful, but I'm done being naive." That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I hired a private investigator. Not some sleazy character from a movie, but a former police detective named Janet Morris, who specialized in matrimonial cases. Her office was small and practical, like her no-nonsense approach to business. "Hotel receipts are good," she said after reviewing what I'd found. But they're not conclusive. You need photos, documented meetings, a clear pattern of behavior. How long will that take? Depends on how careful they're being. From what you've described, they're not being very careful at all. Give me 2 weeks. What about Leonard's wife? Does she know? Janet pulled up Leonard Hale's information on her computer. Miriam Hale, married 23 years, 2 adult children, very active in Boston society, sits on several charity boards. From her social media presence, she appears to believe she has a happy marriage. I stared at Miriam's photo on the screen. She was elegant, well-dressed, smiling at what looked like a charity gala. Another person being betrayed by Leonard's business meetings. Should I contact her? Not yet, Janet said. Let me gather evidence first. If we're going to approach her, we want to do it with enough proof that she can't dismiss it as rumors or jealousy. I left Janet's office feeling more purposeful than I had in months. For the first time in years, I was taking action instead of just reacting to whatever Vivian decided our life should be. That evening, Vivian announced she had another late meeting with Leonard. Investor dinner, she said, applying lipstick in our bedroom mirror. Very important potential backers. She was wearing a black dress I'd never seen before, something that probably cost more than most people's rent. Her perfume was different too, more expensive, more seductive. Will you be late again? Probably. These finance guys like to talk business over drinks. You know how it is. I didn't know how it was, actually. In my line of work, business meetings happened during business hours, usually in offices that smelled like coffee and copy toner. But I just nodded and wished her luck. After she left, I sat in our living room with Emma, watching her work on homework. Dad, she said without looking up from her textbook, I'm sorry about what I said last night, about checking Mom's purse. Why are you sorry? Because I can see it's eating you up inside, and maybe I should have just minded my own business. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. When had she gotten so perceptive? When had she started seeing through the careful facade Vivian and I had maintained? Emma, what made you say that? About the purse? She sighed and closed her textbook. Mom's been different lately, more secretive, and she's been lying about little things, stupid things that don't even matter. Like last week, she said she was getting her nails done, but I saw her car at the mall when I was there with friends. She was shopping for clothes, not getting her nails done. She shook her head as she spoke, frustration and disappointment mixing in her voice, as if she were trying to make sense of behavior that no longer fit the mother she thought she knew. Maybe she wanted to surprise me with something new. I offered the explanation weakly, even as I said it, knowing how thin it sounded. It was the kind of excuse you make when you're not ready to confront the truth yet, when denial still feels safer than clarity. Emma gave me a look that was far too mature for 17. There was no sarcasm in it, just a quiet sadness that cut deeper than anger ever could. Dad, when was the last time Mom bought something to surprise you? Everything she buys is about impressing other people. She didn't say it cruelly. She said it like someone stating an obvious fact they'd already accepted. She was right, and we both knew it. Vivian's recent purchases had all been about projecting an image, successful businesswoman, sophisticated entrepreneur, someone who belonged in Leonard Hale's world of expensive restaurants and luxury hotels. Designer clothes still in their bags, shoes worn once and forgotten, accessories chosen not for comfort or joy, but for how they would look under the right lighting, next to the right people. I'm handling it, I told Emma. I needed her to believe that, and maybe I needed to believe it myself. Good. Because you deserve better than someone who lies to you every day. She held my gaze as she said it, protective in a way that felt backwards, a daughter stepping into a role no child should have to take. That night, I lay awake until Vivian came home at 2:30 in the morning. The house was silent except for the ticking of the clock and the occasional car passing outside. When the door finally opened, I didn't move. She slipped into bed quietly, smelling like wine and that expensive perfume she only wore when she went out with Leonard. The scent lingered in the air between us, heavy and unfamiliar. When she thought I was asleep, she checked her phone one more time before plugging it in to charge. The glow of the screen briefly illuminated her face, focused and intent, like someone checking the final piece of a plan before resting. I waited until her breathing became deep and regular, then carefully reached for her phone. No lock screen. Vivian had always said she had nothing to hide. The irony of that almost made me laugh. The text messages told the whole story. Dozens of exchanges with Leonard, going back months. At first they were professional, discussing business plans and investor meetings, the kind of conversations that could still be explained away. But gradually they became more personal, more intimate, the tone shifting from formal to familiar, from cautious to confident. Recent messages made it clear that their relationship had moved far beyond business. The most recent exchange made my stomach turn. Leonard, tonight was incredible. Can't wait until we don't have to sneak around anymore. Vivian, soon, just need to figure out the cleanest way to handle things at home. Leonard, whatever it takes, we deserve to be happy. Vivian, I know, Rick will be fine. He's resilient. I set the phone back on the nightstand, my hands surprisingly steady. So this wasn't just an affair. They were planning a future together, discussing the end of my marriage like it was a minor inconvenience to be managed. A logistical problem rather than a life being dismantled. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, watching the darkness slowly give way to light, planning my next move. By the time Vivian's alarm went off, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Janet Morris called me 3 days later with news that confirmed everything I already knew, but somehow still hit me like a physical blow. I have photos, she said. Multiple meetings at the Fairmont Hotel, intimate dinners at expensive restaurants, and what appears to be a shopping trip where Leonard purchased jewelry for your wife. How intimate are we talking? Kissing, hand-holding, the kind of behavior that makes it clear this isn't a business relationship. I can email you the photos, but I should warn you, seeing them might be harder than you expect. She was right. The photos showed Vivian and Leonard in various romantic situations over the past week. Vivian laughing at something Leonard said over dinner, her hand on his arm. Leonard fastening a necklace around Vivian's neck in what was clearly a hotel room. The two of them kissing in the parking garage of Leonard's office building. What struck me most wasn't the betrayal. I'd already accepted that reality. It was how happy Vivian looked. In every photo, she was glowing, animated, more alive than I'd seen her in years. This wasn't just about the affair. She was genuinely in love with Leonard Hale. There's something else, Janet said. I did some digging into Leonard's background. He's done this before. What do you mean? 3 years ago, he had an affair with another married woman, someone he met through business connections. When her husband found out, Leonard disappeared from her life completely. She ended up divorced and financially ruined, while Leonard went back to his wife like nothing happened. The pattern was clear. Leonard Hale was a predator who targeted married women, used them for his entertainment, then discarded them when things got complicated, and Vivian had no idea she was following a script he'd already written. What about his wife, Miriam? That's where it gets interesting. I think she knows about the affairs, but she looks the other way because she doesn't want to give up her lifestyle. Leonard comes from old money, and Miriam enjoys being a society wife too much to rock the boat. So she just tolerates it? Maybe. Or maybe she's waiting for the right moment to make her move. Either way, I think you should consider approaching her. If we're going to take down both Leonard and your wife, having his wife on our side could be very useful. That afternoon, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible a week earlier. I sent Miriam Hale an email from a new account I'd created specifically for this purpose. The subject line was simple. We have a mutual problem. The message was brief. Mrs. Hale, my name is Frederick Ashford. I believe our spouses are having an affair. If you're willing to discuss this situation, please respond. I think we might be able to help each other." I sent the email and waited. Part of me hoped she wouldn't respond, that I was wrong about her knowledge of Leonard's behavior. But 3 hours later, my phone chimed with her reply. "Mr. Ashford, I've been expecting this email for weeks. Yes, I'm aware of the situation. We should meet. Are you free tomorrow evening?" She suggested we meet at the bar in the Fairmont Hotel, the same hotel where Leonard and Vivian had been conducting their affair. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose a corner table where we could talk privately. The bar was elegant and dimly lit, the kind of place where wealthy people conducted discreet business. I ordered a whiskey and tried to calm my nerves. Miriam Hale was even more striking in person than in her photos. She was probably in her late 40s, with silver blonde hair and the kind of understated elegance that comes from generations of money. She wore a simple black dress and pearls, and when she walked into the bar, several men turned to look at her. "Frederick?" she asked, approaching my table. "Rick," I said, standing to shake her hand. "Thank you for coming." She ordered a martini and studied me with intelligent gray eyes. They were the kind of eyes that missed very little, sharp and assessing, as if she were already measuring my usefulness in whatever calculation she was running. "You look exactly like Leonard described you. He called you harmless." The word stung, landing somewhere just below my ribs, but I kept my expression neutral. Years of fixing computers for impatient clients had taught me how to absorb insults without reacting. "And what did he say about your marriage?" "That it was convenient, but passionless." She let out a short, humorless laugh. "Leonard has always been a romantic, you see. He believes he deserves grand passion, even if he has to steal it from someone else's life." Her tone was bitter but controlled, like someone who'd had years to perfect her resentment instead of letting it consume her. There was no hysteria in her voice, no self-pity, just a precise accounting of betrayal. "How long have you known about Vivian?" "Since the beginning." She didn't hesitate. "Leonard isn't as discreet as he thinks he is. He uses the same restaurants, the same hotel, even the same jewelry store. It's like he's following a playbook." She took a sip of her drink, eyes never leaving my face. "Once you recognize the pattern, it's impossible to unsee. Janet Morris mentioned he's done this before." Miriam's eyebrows rose slightly, a flicker of approval passing across her face. "You hired a private investigator." "Good. Yes, Leonard has a pattern. He finds married women who are dissatisfied with their lives, promises them excitement and sophistication, then disappears when reality intrudes. Your wife is the fourth that I know of." She paused, then added, "Possibly the fifth. There are rumors." "And you've just tolerated it?" The question came out sharper than I intended. "I've been strategic about it." She didn't bristle. If anything, she seemed amused. "The first affair, I was devastated. I threatened divorce, made scenes, demanded he choose between her and our family. He chose our family naturally, because divorce would have cost him half of everything. But I realized I was fighting the symptom, not the disease." She sipped her martini and continued, her voice calm, almost instructional. "The second affair, I documented everything but didn't confront him. When it ended naturally, I used the evidence to renegotiate our prenuptial agreement in my favor. The third affair, I used the distraction to move significant assets into my own name." She met my eyes again. "Leonard thinks he's very clever. He has no idea how much of his empire is already beyond his reach." "And this time?" "This time I think Leonard has finally bitten off more than he can chew. Your wife isn't content to be a mistress. She wants him to leave me." There was no jealousy in her voice now, only calculation. I thought about the text messages I'd seen on Vivian's phone. She's pushing him to make a choice. Exactly. And Leonard has never been forced to actually choose before. He's panicking, which makes him sloppy. A thin smile touched her lips. "Which gives us an opportunity." "What kind of opportunity?" Miriam reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope, placing it carefully on the table between us. Copies of everything I've documented over the past 3 months. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, jewelry purchases, even recordings of some phone conversations. Recordings? Leonard often takes calls on speaker when he's at home, especially when he's been drinking. Her smile faded. I started keeping my phone nearby just in case. Your wife has said some very interesting things about her plans for your marriage. My chest tightened despite my efforts to stay detached. What kind of plans? She wants Leonard to file for divorce first, to make it look like he's the one ending his marriage for love. Then you would be the abandoned husband, while she's the woman who found true love. Miriam tilted her head slightly. Very romantic, very sympathetic. Except I'd be left with nothing while she starts a new life with a millionaire. Precisely. She leaned back, clearly enjoying the symmetry of it. But here's what they don't know. I've been 3 steps ahead of them the entire time. Leonard thinks he's been hiding assets, but I've been tracking every move. She paused, letting that sink in. And I have a proposal for you. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper, the noise of the restaurant suddenly feeling far away. We destroy them both, publicly, financially, socially. We make sure that when this affair ends, neither of them comes out unscathed. What did you have in mind? First, we need lawyers. Good ones who can work together to coordinate our divorces. I can recommend someone excellent, Douglas Wren. He's handled several high-profile cases and he doesn't lose. And then? Then we force them to confront the reality of their choices. We make them choose between their affair and their reputations, and we make sure that no matter what they choose, they lose. I studied Miriam's face, looking for any sign that this was some kind of trap. But all I saw was cold determination and the kind of calculating intelligence that comes from years of being underestimated. Why are you helping me? You could probably handle Leonard on your own. Because your wife is different from the others. She's not content to be a secret. She's pushing Leonard toward a decision he doesn't want to make, and that makes her dangerous to my plans. If I'm going to end my marriage on my terms, I need to neutralize her influence first. And if I say no, then you'll go home to your wife who's planning to leave you anyway, and I'll handle Leonard my way. But you'll always wonder what might have happened if you'd been brave enough to fight back. I thought about Emma's words. You're so gullible, Dad. I thought about Vivian's text messages, discussing my future like I was a problem to be solved. I thought about Leonard calling me harmless. What's the first step? Miriam smiled for the first time since sitting down. We make an appointment with Douglas Wren, together. Then we start gathering evidence that will hold up in court, and then we plan a little surprise for our cheating spouses. What kind of surprise? The kind they'll never see coming. We spent the next hour going over details. Miriam had been planning this for months, waiting for the right opportunity. She'd already moved significant assets into accounts Leonard couldn't access, documented his pattern of affairs, and built relationships with key people in their social circle who would be sympathetic to a wronged wife. The key, she explained, is to control the narrative. When this comes out, and it will come out, we need to be the victims, not the vindictive ex-spouses. Leonard and your wife need to be seen as selfish, destructive people who broke up 2 families for their own pleasure. And you think that will work? I know it will work. I've been part of Boston society for 20 years. I know exactly how these people think, what they value, and what they'll condemn. An affair is forgivable if it's discreet and temporary, but an affair that destroys families and causes public embarrassment, that's unforgivable. When we parted ways, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not hope for saving my marriage. That was clearly over. But hope that I wouldn't be the passive victim Vivian and Leonard expected me to be. I drove home to find Vivian in our bedroom, trying on another new dress. "What do you think?" she asked, spinning around to show off the outfit. "I have another investor meeting tonight." The dress was red, form-fitting, and definitely not appropriate for a business meeting. But I just smiled and told her she looked beautiful. "Will Leonard be there?" I asked casually. "Of course. He's the primary investor. Why?" "Just curious. You two seem to work well together." Something flickered across Vivian's face. Guilt, maybe, or fear. But she recovered quickly. "He's very professional, very focused on results." "I'm sure he is." After she left for her meeting, I called Douglas Wren's office and made an appointment for the following day. Then I sat down with Emma and told her everything. "I knew it," she said when I finished. "I've known for months. Mom's been acting like a teenager with a crush." "Why didn't you say anything?" "What was I supposed to say?" "Hey, Dad, I think Mom is cheating on you. I hoped you'd figure it out on your own." "I'm sorry you had to deal with this alone." Emma shrugged. "I'm not a little kid anymore. I can handle knowing that my parents' marriage is falling apart. What I couldn't handle was watching you pretend everything was fine when it obviously wasn't." "What happens now?" "Now we fight back. Your mother thinks she can just walk away from our family without consequences. She's about to learn how wrong she is." That night, I lay in bed listening to Vivian's lies about her evening. She spun an elaborate story about investor presentations and business strategies, her voice animated with fake enthusiasm. I nodded and asked appropriate questions, playing the role of the supportive husband one last time. But inside, I was planning. Tomorrow I would meet with Douglas Wren. Tomorrow I would start building a case that would ensure Vivian and Leonard paid for what they'd done to our families. Tomorrow, the harmless husband would start fighting back. Douglas Wren's office occupied the top floor of a downtown Boston building, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding view of the harbor. Sunlight poured in through the glass, illuminating polished wood floors and minimalist furniture that spoke less of ostentation and more of quiet confidence. The height alone felt intentional, as if every meeting held here was meant to remind visitors who had the advantage. The lawyer himself was nothing like I'd expected. Instead of an expensive suit and slicked-back hair, he wore khakis and a button-down shirt, looking more like a college professor than a high-powered attorney. His calm demeanor and relaxed posture suggested someone who didn't need to dress the part to dominate a room. "Mrs. Hale speaks very highly of you," he said, shaking my hand with a firm grip. His eyes were sharp, observant, cataloging reactions and weaknesses without appearing to. "She says you're ready to take the gloves off." "I'm ready to stop being a victim." The words came out steadier than I felt, but once spoken, they settled into place like a commitment. "Good. Victims don't win custody battles or property settlements. Fighters do." There was no cruelty in his tone, just a statement of fact, delivered by someone who had seen enough courtrooms to know how these stories usually ended. Miriam arrived 10 minutes later, carrying a briefcase that I suspected contained enough evidence to destroy both our marriages. She moved with purpose, every step measured, every expression carefully controlled. She dressed conservatively, navy suit, minimal jewelry, the picture of a respectable wife wronged by her husband's infidelity. If this were theater, she understood her role perfectly. "Gentlemen," she said, taking a seat across from Douglas's desk. Her voice was composed, but there was steel beneath it. "Shall we begin planning Leonard's downfall?" Douglas opened a legal pad and uncapped an expensive pen. The motion was unhurried, deliberate. "Before we start strategizing revenge, let's talk about your goals. Mrs. Hale, you've been clear about wanting to end your marriage on your terms. Mr. Ashford, what do you want to accomplish?" I'd been thinking about that question for days, turning it over from every angle, stripping away the anger until only what truly mattered remained. "I want my daughter to know that her father isn't a pushover. I want Vivian to face consequences for what she's done, and I want to make sure Leonard Hale never does this to another family." Those are good goals, but they're not legal objectives. In court, We need to focus on custody, property division, and spousal support. The revenge part has to be subtle, built into the legal strategy rather than the headline. Douglas spoke like a chess player explaining the board several moves ahead. Miriam leaned forward, resting her forearms on the desk. What Douglas is saying is that we need to be smart about this. Emotional satisfaction and legal victory aren't always the same thing. But they can be, Douglas added with a slight smile, if we play this correctly. We spent the next 2 hours going through evidence. The time blurred as documents were spread across the desk, phones passed back and forth, timelines reconstructed. Miriam's documentation was thorough and damaging, not just proof of the affair, but evidence of Leonard's pattern of financial manipulation and emotional abuse. Credit card statements, emails, recordings, each one adding another layer to a man who carefully curated his public image. My evidence was more limited but still compelling, especially the text messages discussing their plans for my future, written as if my life were an inconvenience to be managed rather than a person to be respected. Here's what we're going to do, Douglas said finally, leaning back in his chair. Mrs. Hale, you're going to file for divorce first, citing irreconcilable differences and requesting a significant property settlement based on your husband's infidelity. Mr. Ashford, you're going to wait until after Leonard and your wife think they've weathered the initial storm. Then you'll file, with full documentation of the affair and a request for primary custody based on your wife's abandonment of family responsibilities. Why wait? I asked. The delay felt counterintuitive, almost passive, and patience hadn't been my strength lately. Because timing is everything. If you both file simultaneously, it looks coordinated, vindictive. But if Mrs. Hale files first, and you appear to be a secondary victim who only discovered the affair later, you become sympathetic rather than calculating. Miriam nodded approvingly. And in the meantime, Leonard and Vivian will think they're in the clear. They'll get careless, maybe even accelerate their plans. The more evidence we can gather of them planning their future together while still married to us, the better. There's something else, Douglas said. His tone shifted slightly, signaling a move from defense to offense. I think we should consider a public confrontation, something that forces them to acknowledge what they've done in front of witnesses. What kind of confrontation? I asked, already sensing where this was going. The kind where they walk into a situation expecting privacy and find themselves facing both betrayed spouses and legal representation. The shock value alone would be worth it, but more importantly, their reactions would be telling. Miriam's eyes lit up with something that might have been anticipation. It wasn't joy. It was resolve. I know exactly when and where to do it. Where? Vivian has been pressuring Leonard to take her to Antonio's, that new Italian restaurant downtown. It's the kind of place where Boston society goes to see and be seen. Leonard has been avoiding it because he's afraid of being spotted with her, but she's been pushing harder lately. How do you know all this? Because I've been listening to their phone conversations for weeks. Vivian wants to go public with their relationship, and she sees Antonio's as a test. If Leonard will take her there, it means he's serious about leaving me. Douglas was already making notes, his pen moving quickly. So we force his hand, make him choose between disappointing her and risking exposure. Exactly. And when they show up for their romantic dinner, they'll find us waiting with divorce papers and a very public confrontation. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Miriam would manipulate Leonard into taking Vivian to Antonio's by making casual comments about wanting to try the restaurant herself. Leonard's guilt would make him avoid the place, which would frustrate Vivian and increase her pressure for a public date. Eventually, he'd give in just to keep her happy. Meanwhile, we would make a reservation for the same night, requesting a table in the main dining room where we'd be visible to other patrons. When Leonard and Vivian arrived, they'd find themselves facing both betrayed spouses in the most public way possible. What if they just leave? I asked. They won't, Miriam said confidently. Leonard's pride won't let him run away in front of a restaurant full of people he knows. And your wife will see it as her chance to finally have the confrontation she's been building toward. And then what? Douglas smiled. Then we serve them both with divorce papers in front of 50 witnesses and let Boston society draw its own conclusions. I left the meeting feeling like I was finally taking control of my life. For weeks, I'd been reacting to Vivian's choices, discovering her lies, uncovering her betrayal. Now, I was making choices of my own. That evening, Vivian announced another late meeting with Leonard. Big investor dinner, she said, applying lipstick in our bathroom mirror. Could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for. She was wearing the red dress again, the one that was definitely not appropriate for business. Her perfume filled the bathroom with its expensive scent, and I noticed she'd had her hair done that afternoon. You look beautiful, I said, and meant it. Whatever else had gone wrong between us, Vivian was still a striking woman. Leonard Hale was getting the best version of my wife, the excited, passionate woman I remembered from our early years together. Thank you, she said, kissing my cheek. Don't wait up. These finance guys like to celebrate when deals go well. After she left, I sat down with Emma to discuss the plan Douglas and Miriam had developed. You're really going to ambush them at a restaurant? She asked. We're going to force them to face the consequences of their choices. Good. Mom needs to stop acting like this is some romantic movie where she gets to ride off into the sunset without hurting anyone. Are you okay with all this? I know it's going to be difficult when everything comes out. Emma was quiet for a moment, then looked at me with those two mature eyes. Dad, this family has been falling apart for months. At least now we're being honest about it. What do you want to happen with custody? I know the lawyers will ask. I want to live with you. Mom's been so focused on her new life that she's basically forgotten I exist. Last week she missed my parent-teacher conference because she had a business meeting that couldn't be rescheduled. I'm sorry. Don't apologize for her choices. Just promise me you'll fight for us, for our family, what's left of it. I promise. The next few days passed in a strange kind of suspended animation. Vivian continued her charade of business meetings and investor dinners while I played the role of the oblivious husband. But underneath the surface, we were both preparing for war. Miriam called me twice with updates on Leonard's behavior. Her psychological manipulation was working perfectly. Leonard was becoming increasingly agitated about the restaurant situation, torn between his desire to keep Vivian happy and his fear of public exposure. He's cracking, Miriam reported. Last night he was pacing around the house, muttering about complications and impossible situations. I think he's starting to realize that your wife isn't content to be a secret anymore. And Vivian? According to the phone conversations I've recorded, she's getting impatient. She wants him to make a grand gesture, something that proves he's serious about their future together. Taking her to Antonio's would be exactly that kind of gesture. When do you think he'll give in? Soon. I made a comment this morning about wanting to try their new menu, and Leonard practically jumped out of his skin. He'll take her there within the week, just to prove to himself that he's not afraid. She was right. 3 days later, Vivian came home glowing with excitement. Leonard is taking me to Antonio's tomorrow night, she announced. He says it's time we stopped hiding our business relationship. The irony of that statement was almost too much to bear, but I just smiled and told her to have a good time. It's a very exclusive restaurant, she continued, the kind of place where serious business gets done. I'm sure it is. That night, I called Douglas to confirm our reservation and go over the final details. Miriam would arrive first and take our table, positioning herself where she could see the entrance. I would arrive separately, joining her just before Leonard and Vivian's reservation time. When they walked in, they would see us immediately. There would be no opportunity to retreat or regroup. Are you ready for this? Douglas asked. I've been ready for weeks. Remember, the goal is to stay calm and controlled. Let them be the ones who look emotional and irrational. We want to appear like the reasonable parties who are simply trying to resolve a difficult situation. What if Vivian tries to deny everything? She won't. Not with Miriam sitting right there with recordings and photographs. Your wife is many things, but she's not stupid. She'll know the game is up. I barely slept that night. Vivian lay beside me, probably dreaming about her romantic dinner with Leonard, while I stared at the ceiling and planned exactly what I would say when I saw them together. The next evening, I watched Vivian get ready for what she thought would be a triumphant public debut with her lover. She spent an hour on her hair and makeup, choosing a black dress that was elegant enough for fine dining, but striking enough to make a statement. "How do I look?" she asked, spinning around in front of our bedroom mirror. "Like a woman about to make a very important decision," I said. She smiled, completely missing the double meaning. "I think tonight is going to change everything." I'm sure it will. After she left, I put on my best suit and drove downtown to Antonio's. The restaurant was exactly as Miriam had described, elegant, expensive, and full of Boston's social elite. I could see why Leonard had been avoiding it. This was the kind of place where affairs became public knowledge within hours. Miriam was already seated at our table, wearing a simple but elegant dress and looking completely composed. She nodded slightly when she saw me, and I joined her just as the hostess was seating Leonard and Vivian across the restaurant. They hadn't seen us yet. Leonard was helping Vivian with her coat, playing the role of the attentive gentleman. Vivian was looking around the restaurant with obvious pleasure, taking in the expensive decor and well-dressed clientele. "Are you ready?" Miriam asked quietly. "I've been ready for weeks." "Then let's go remind our spouses that actions have consequences." We stood up and walked across the restaurant toward their table. I watched Vivian's face as she noticed us approaching. Confusion, then recognition, then something that might have been fear. Leonard saw us a moment later. His face went completely white. "Hello, darling," Miriam said pleasantly, taking the empty chair next to Leonard. "I hope you don't mind if we join you for dinner." The confrontation I'd been planning for weeks was finally about to begin. The silence at the table stretched for what felt like an eternity. Leonard sat frozen, his hand still on his wine glass, while Vivian stared at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Part guilt, part defiance, and part calculation. "Rick," she said finally, her voice carefully controlled. "What are you doing here?" "Having dinner with my new friend Miriam," I said, settling into the chair across from her. "Turns out we have a lot in common." Leonard found his voice. "This is inappropriate. Vivian and I are having a business dinner." Miriam laughed, a sound like crystal breaking. "Business dinner? Is that what we're calling it now?" She reached into her purse and placed a small digital recorder on the white tablecloth. "Because I have several hours of recorded conversations that suggest otherwise." The color drained from Leonard's face. "You've been recording my phone calls?" "Our phone calls, darling. In Massachusetts, only one party needs to consent to recording a conversation. I've been consenting for months." Vivian's composure finally cracked. "What do you want?" I leaned forward, keeping my voice low and steady. "We want honesty. For once in the past 6 months, we want the truth." "The truth about what?" "About the hotel receipts I found in your purse. About the text messages discussing our divorce like it was a foregone conclusion. About the jewelry Leonard bought you that you've been hiding in your car." Vivian's eyes widened. She hadn't known I'd found the jewelry. "You've been going through my things?" "Your things?" "Vivian, we're married. We don't have separate things, or we didn't, until you decided to start a new life with someone else's husband." Leonard tried to regain control of the situation. "Look, this is obviously a misunderstanding. Vivian and I have a professional relationship that may have become overly friendly, but..." "Stop." Miriam's voice cut through his explanation like a blade. Just stop lying. I know about the hotel rooms. I know about the shopping trips. I know about your plans to leave your respective spouses and start fresh together. She pulled out a manila folder and spread photographs across the table. Leonard and Vivian kissing in a parking garage. Leonard fastening a necklace around Vivian's neck. The two of them holding hands over dinner at another restaurant. I also know this isn't your first affair, Leonard. Should I tell Vivian about the other women? About how each of them thought they were special until you got bored and moved on? Leonard's jaw tightened. Miriam, you're making a scene. I'm making a scene? You're having an affair in the most public restaurant in Boston, and I'm making a scene? Other diners were starting to notice the tension at our table. I could see people whispering, phones being discreetly pointed in our direction. In the age of social media, this confrontation would be public knowledge within the hour. Vivian seemed to realize this too. She straightened in her chair, and I saw her shift into the persona she'd been cultivating for months, the sophisticated businesswoman who deserved better than her blue-collar husband. Fine, she said. You want honesty? Here's honesty. Leonard and I are in love. We're planning a future together. Our marriages are over, and pretending otherwise is just delaying the inevitable. How noble of you, I said. Very mature, conducting your love affair while living in my house and spending my money. Your money? Rick, I haven't been happy in our marriage for years. Leonard offers me things you never could. Sophistication, culture, a real partnership. And what does he offer you, Leonard? Miriam asked her husband. Besides a temporary escape from your responsibilities? Leonard was sweating now, glancing around the restaurant as if looking for an escape route. This isn't the place for this conversation. No, I agreed. The place for this conversation was 6 months ago, before you started sleeping with my wife. But since you chose to make your relationship public by coming here, this seems like the perfect place to discuss consequences. I pulled out my own folder, copies of the divorce papers Douglas had prepared, along with documentation of Leonard's assets that Miriam had helped me compile. Consequences like these, I said, sliding papers across the table to both of them. Vivian, you'll notice that I'm requesting primary custody of Emma, along with the house and half of all marital assets. I'm also requesting spousal support, since your affair has made it clear that our marriage is ending due to your infidelity. Vivian's hands shook as she looked through the papers. You can't do this. Actually, I can, and I am. Leonard was reading his own set of papers, his face growing paler with each page. Miriam, this is excessive. You're asking for 60% of everything. I'm asking for compensation for 23 years of marriage to a serial adulterer. The prenup you insisted on becomes void when infidelity is proven. My lawyers are very confident about our case. Your lawyers? Vivian looked between Miriam and me. How long have you two been planning this? About as long as you and Leonard have been planning to destroy our families, I said. The difference is, we're not pretending this is some grand romance. We're treating it like what it is. A betrayal that requires consequences. Leonard finally found his backbone. You can't prove anything. Those photos could be doctored. The recordings could be taken out of context. Leonard, Miriam interrupted. I have video of you and Vivian in our bedroom. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the ambient noise of the restaurant seemed to fade as Leonard processed what his wife had just said. What? Security cameras. I had them installed 6 months ago when I suspected you were bringing women to our house. The bedroom, the living room, even the kitchen. I have hours of footage of you and Vivian in our home, discussing your plans, making love, laughing about how gullible your respective spouses are. Vivian looked like she might be sick. You recorded us without consent? In my own home, darling. Perfectly legal. Leonard stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I'm not listening to any more of this. Sit down, I said quietly. You're not going anywhere until we finish this conversation. You can't tell me what to do. I stood up as well, and Leonard took a step back. I might not have his money or his social connections, but I had 6 inches of height and years of manual labor that had kept me in shape. More importantly, I had the moral authority of someone who'd been wronged, and everyone in the restaurant could see it. "Leonard," I said, my voice carrying across the dining room, "you've been sleeping with my wife for 6 months. You've been in my house, eating food I paid for, probably laughing about what a fool I am. The least you can do is sit down and listen while I explain how your life is about to change." The restaurant had gone completely quiet. Every conversation had stopped. Every eye was on our table. Leonard looked around desperately, then slowly sat back down. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued, my voice calm but carrying to every corner of the room. "You're both going to face the consequences of your choices. Vivian, you're going to discover that leaving a 15-year marriage for a man who's cheated on his wife multiple times isn't the fairy tale you imagined. Leonard, you're going to learn that some betrayals cost more than you're willing to pay." "And if we refuse?" Vivian asked, though her voice lacked conviction. Miriam smiled. "Then the videos and recordings become public. I have enough documentation to destroy both of your reputations permanently. Leonard's business associates will love learning about his pattern of seducing married clients. And Vivian, I'm sure your family will be fascinated to see exactly how you've been conducting your business meetings." "You're blackmailing us," Leonard said. "We're offering you a choice," I corrected. "You can work with us to end this situation quietly and with some dignity intact, or you can force us to make everything public. Either way, your affair is over and our marriages are ending. The only question is how much collateral damage you want to cause." Vivian was crying now, though she was trying to hide it. "Rick, we can work this out. We don't have to involve lawyers and all this drama. We could have worked it out 6 months ago before you started lying to me every day. We could have worked it out 3 months ago before you started planning my future without consulting me. But you made your choice, Vivian. Now I'm making mine." Leonard tried one last desperate play. "What if we end it? Right now? What if Vivian and I agree to stop seeing each other and try to save our marriages?" Miriam and I exchanged glances. We'd anticipated this offer. "It's too late for that," Miriam said gently. "Leonard, this is your 4th affair. I'm done pretending you're going to change. And Vivian, the things you said about Rick in those recordings, there's no coming back from that level of contempt." "What did she say?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Miriam hesitated, then pulled out her phone and played a brief audio clip. Vivian's voice was clear and unmistakable. "Rick is so pathetic. He actually thinks I'm building a business. He has no idea that I'm planning a real life with someone who can give me what I deserve. Sometimes I look at him fixing his stupid truck in the garage, and I wonder how I wasted 15 years on someone so small." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. Around us, the restaurant remained silent, every patron listening to the dissolution of my marriage in real time. "Well," I said finally, "I guess that settles any question about whether this marriage can be saved." Vivian reached across the table toward me. "Rick, I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did. And you know what? You're right. I am small compared to Leonard. I fix computers and drive an old truck and shop at regular stores. But I'm also loyal and honest, and I would never humiliate you in front of a room full of strangers." I stood up and dropped my napkin on the table. "Enjoy your dinner, both of you. It's probably the last meal you'll ever share, because Leonard has a pattern of disappearing when his affairs become public. Ask the other women he's discarded." Leonard's face flushed red. "You don't know anything about me." "I know you're a coward who preys on unhappy women and abandons them when things get complicated. I know you've done this before and you'll do it again. And I know that in 6 months, when Vivian is alone and broke and wondering what happened to her great romance, she'll finally understand what kind of man she threw away her family for." I turned to leave, then stopped. "Oh, and Leonard? Stay away from my house. If I see you on my property again, we'll have a very different kind of conversation." Miriam gathered her papers and stood to follow me. "The divorce papers will be filed tomorrow morning. Leonard, your belongings will be packed and waiting for you. Don't come home tonight." As we walked away from the table, I could hear Vivian crying and Leonard trying to calm her down. But I didn't look back. I'd said everything I needed to say. Outside the restaurant, Miriam and I stood on the sidewalk in the cool evening air. "How do you feel?" she asked, like I finally stood up for myself. "Good, because this is just the beginning. Now comes the real fight." She was right. The confrontation at Antonio's had been satisfying, but it was just the opening move in a much longer game. Over the next few months, we would battle over custody, property, and the future of our children. Leonard and Vivian would try to salvage their reputations and their relationship. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of my own life. I'd stopped being the harmless, gullible husband and become someone willing to fight for what mattered to me. The war was just beginning, but I'd won the first battle, and that was enough for now. The next 3 weeks moved with the momentum of an avalanche. The confrontation at Antonio's had been recorded by multiple restaurant patrons, and within hours, grainy cell phone videos were circulating on social media. The Boston Society gossip mill went into overdrive, dissecting every detail of the public breakdown of two prominent marriages. Leonard's business suffered immediately. 3 major clients terminated their contracts, citing concerns about professional judgment. His country club membership was quietly suspended, pending a review of his conduct. Most devastating of all, his business partners called an emergency meeting to discuss his future with the firm. Vivian fared no better. Her parents, who had been funding her supposed business venture, froze all financial support when they learned the truth about her investor meetings. Her few genuine friends distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. The local newspaper ran a small item about the restaurant confrontation, carefully avoiding names but providing enough details that everyone in our social circle knew exactly who was involved. But the real consequences were just beginning. Douglas Wren proved to be as effective as Miriam had promised. Within days of filing the divorce papers, he'd frozen joint accounts, secured temporary custody arrangements, and filed injunctions that prevented either Leonard or Vivian from disposing of marital assets. Leonard's attempts to hide money in offshore accounts were discovered and documented, adding financial fraud to the list of charges Miriam could pursue. "Your wife is panicking," Douglas informed me during one of our strategy sessions. "Her lawyer called 3 times yesterday trying to negotiate a settlement. Apparently, Vivian just realized that adultery affects property division in Massachusetts." "What's she offering?" "Joint custody, a 50-50 split of assets, and no spousal support from either party. Basically, she wants to pretend the affair never happened and split everything down the middle." "And Leonard?" "Leonard's in worse shape. Miriam's evidence of his previous affairs has convinced the judge that he's been systematically hiding assets for years. He's looking at losing 60% of everything, plus paying substantial spousal support." I should have felt satisfied, but mostly I felt empty. Destroying my marriage, even a marriage that had been built on lies, wasn't the victory I'd imagined. "What about Emma?" "Your daughter has been very clear about wanting to live with you. At 17, the court will give significant weight to her preference. Vivian's abandonment of parental responsibilities during the affair doesn't help her case." That evening, I sat in my garage working on the truck, trying to process everything that had happened. The space felt different now, less like a refuge and more like a workshop where I was rebuilding my life piece by piece. Emma found me there, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the worried expression she'd developed over the past month. "How are you holding up?" she asked, handing me one of the cups. "I'm not sure. This isn't how I imagined my life would go." "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you regret it? Fighting back, I mean. Would you rather have just let Mom leave quietly? I considered the question carefully. No, I don't regret it. But I wish it hadn't been necessary. She made it necessary when she decided to lie to us for 6 months. Emma was right, but her maturity in dealing with our family's destruction broke my heart. She should have been worried about prom dates and college applications, not comforting her father through a bitter divorce. What do you want to happen now? I asked. I want Mom to face the truth about what she's done, not just to you but to our family. She's been acting like this is some romantic movie where she gets to follow her heart without hurting anyone. But she did hurt people. She hurt you, and she hurt me, and she needs to acknowledge that. And Leonard? Emma's expression hardened. Leonard is a predator who destroyed our family for his own entertainment. I want him to pay for that. The next morning, Vivian called me for the first time since the restaurant confrontation. Rick, we need to talk, she said without preamble. This has gone too far. I'm listening. Can we meet? Somewhere private. I want to explain. There's nothing to explain, Vivian. You've been very clear about your feelings and your plans. That recording Miriam played, I was angry. I didn't mean those things. Yes, you did. And you know what? I'm glad you said them. For the first time in months, you were being honest about how you see me. Rick, please. We have a daughter to think about. We can't destroy our family over this. We didn't destroy our family, Vivian. You did. When you decided Leonard Hale was more important than the life we'd built together. What do you want from me? What will it take to end this war? I thought about her question. What did I want? Justice, revenge, an apology that would somehow undo the past 6 months? I want you to tell Emma the truth, I said finally. I want you to sit down with our daughter and explain why you chose to have an affair instead of trying to fix our marriage. I want you to acknowledge that you put your own desires ahead of your family's well-being. And then? And then we'll proceed with the divorce as our lawyers have outlined. You'll get what you're entitled to under Massachusetts law, nothing more and nothing less. What about Leonard and me? What about you? Will you try to destroy our relationship? I laughed, though there was no humor in it. Vivian, I don't need to destroy your relationship with Leonard. He's going to do that himself. Miriam was right about his pattern. He disappears when his affairs become complicated. How long do you think he'll stick around now that his reputation is ruined and his finances are frozen? You don't know him like I do. I know him better than you think. He's a coward who preys on unhappy women and abandons them when the cost gets too high. You're about to learn that the hard way. I was right. 2 days later, Leonard Hale disappeared. Miriam called me with the news. He cleaned out what was left of his accessible accounts and left town. No forwarding address, no contact information. His law firm is claiming they have no idea where he went. What about Vivian? According to my sources, he sent her a text message saying he needed time to think and would contact her when things settled down. That was 3 days ago. I should have felt vindicated, but mostly I felt sorry for Vivian. Whatever her faults, she genuinely believed Leonard loved her. Discovering that she'd been just another temporary diversion had to be devastating. Emma was less sympathetic. Good, she said, when I told her about Leonard's disappearance. Maybe now Mom will understand what kind of man she threw away her family for. That weekend, Vivian showed up at our house, her former house, looking haggard and desperate. She'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. He's gone, she said without preamble when I opened the door. I know. He said he loved me. He said we were going to build a life together. Vivian? I gave up everything for him, my marriage, my family, my reputation, and he just left. I stepped aside to let her in. Whatever had happened between us, I couldn't leave her standing on the doorstep in her current state. Emma appeared in the hallway, took one look at her mother, and shook her head in disgust. Really, Mom? You're going to come here looking for sympathy? Emma, please, I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. You made a choice, multiple choices over several months. Don't minimize it by calling it a mistake. Vivian turned to me with desperate eyes. Rick, can we try again? Can we work this out? The question I'd been dreading. Part of me, the part that remembered 15 years of marriage, that wanted to believe in redemption and second chances, wanted to say yes. But the larger part, the part that had heard her call me pathetic and small, knew it was impossible. No, I said gently. We can't. Why not? Leonard is gone. We could start over. Because you didn't leave me for Leonard, Vivian. You left me for the person Leonard made you feel like you could be. And I can't be that person for you. I don't understand. You fell in love with a version of yourself that only existed in Leonard's world, the sophisticated businesswoman, the cultured socialite, the woman who deserved better than a computer repair technician from the suburbs. That woman was never real, but she's who you want to be, and I can't give you that life. Vivian sank onto our couch, the expensive white furniture she'd insisted we needed to project success. So what happens now? Now you figure out who you really are without Leonard's fantasy to hide behind. And I figure out who I am without a wife who sees me as an obstacle to the life she really wants. And Emma? Our daughter stepped forward, her expression sad but resolute. I'm staying with Dad. You made it clear that your new life was more important than our family. I'm not going to pretend that didn't happen. Her voice didn't tremble, even though her hands did slightly at her sides. She wasn't angry anymore. She was finished, and that felt somehow heavier than shouting ever could. Emma, I love you. I know you do. But love isn't enough when you're not willing to put the people you love first. She didn't raise her voice or accuse. She simply stated a truth she'd already made peace with, the kind of truth that doesn't ask for arguments or explanations. Vivian left an hour later, and I knew it would be the last time she'd come to our house looking for reconciliation. There were no dramatic goodbyes, no promises to call, no lingering looks back at the life she was walking away from. The divorce would proceed, the lawyers would divide our assets, and we'd both start building new lives from the wreckage of our marriage. It was strangely procedural, almost mundane, considering how much history was being closed behind her with every step down the driveway. But there was one more conversation I needed to have. I found Charlie at the boxing gym, training a young fighter who reminded me of myself at that age, determined, angry, looking for a way to channel his frustration into something productive. The kid hit the pads too hard, too fast, like he was trying to punish the air for something it had done to him. Charlie corrected his stance patiently, the way he always had with me. How are you holding up? Charlie asked, after dismissing the kid for the day. The gym grew quiet, except for the hum of the lights and the faint echo of punches still ringing in my ears. I won, I said, so why don't I feel better about it? Because winning isn't the same as healing. You proved that you're not the pushover your wife thought you were. You showed her and her boyfriend that actions have consequences, but that doesn't fix the hurt they caused. He spoke from experience, not theory, and that made it land harder. So what does? Time, and figuring out what you want your life to look like now that you're free to choose. He handed me a pair of gloves without saying anything else. I spent the next hour hitting the heavy bag, working out months of anger and frustration and disappointment. Each punch carried something with it: betrayal, resentment, regret, even relief. My arms burned, my lungs screamed, and my thoughts finally went quiet. When I finally stopped, sweating and exhausted, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. Not happiness. That would come later, maybe. But peace with my choices, with the consequences I'd imposed, with the future I was building for Emma and myself. Peace with the fact that I hadn't taken the easy way out, even when it would have hurt less in the moment. Vivian had been right about one thing. I was small compared to Leonard Hale. I didn't have his money or his social connections or his sophisticated lifestyle. But I had something he'd never possessed: the courage to face the consequences of my choices and the integrity to treat the people I loved with respect. Those things didn't show up on balance sheets, but they mattered when everything else fell apart. That night, Emma and I ordered pizza and watched old movies, something we hadn't done since before Vivian's affair began. We argued over toppings, quoted lines we both remembered, and laughed at scenes that hadn't been funny in years. For the first time in months, our house felt like a home again. "Dad," Emma said during a commercial break, "I'm proud of you." "For what?" "For fighting back. For showing me that you don't have to accept being treated badly, even by people you love." "Is that the lesson you're taking from all this?" "That's one of them. The other is that some people will always choose themselves over their families, and when they do, you have to be strong enough to let them go." She said it thoughtfully, not bitterly, like someone filing away a rule she'd use later in life. I looked at my daughter, nearly 18, wise beyond her years, preparing to leave for college in a few months, and realized that maybe something good had come from the destruction of my marriage. Emma had learned that she deserved to be treated with respect, that love without loyalty was meaningless, and that sometimes fighting back was the only way to preserve your dignity. Those were lessons that would serve her well in life, even if I wished she hadn't had to learn them by watching her parents' marriage collapse. Outside, it started to rain, but inside our house, Emma and I were warm and safe, and finally honest with each other about what we'd been through. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in months, it felt like it belonged to us. Leonard Hale was gone, probably already working on seducing his next victim. Vivian would eventually rebuild her life, hopefully with more honesty than she'd brought to our marriage. And I would continue fixing computers and driving my old truck and living the small but authentic life that had never been enough for her, but was perfect for me. The harmless husband was gone, replaced by someone who knew his own worth and wouldn't accept anything less than he deserved. It had taken the destruction of my marriage to find that person, but now that I wasn't going to let him